Hello and welcome to the world of cycling. The Giro d'Italia has of course reached its final rest day and there is 1 week left in the race for the Maglia Rosa. There is so much other racing going on at the moment as well, though. We look into the Vuelta a Burgos Feminas and some fantastic racing there. Plus, there is also potentially some big news in the career of a certain Mark Cavendish. Here in the studio with me to talk over it all, of course, the Giro Dream Team themselves is both Rob Hatch and Sean Kelly. Guys, thank you for joining me again this week. Before we get into things, let's just have a little recap about what's been going down over in Italy.
Eyebrows will be raised, ears pricked up, and we wonder how those post-rest day legs are, Sean. This is Cort's golden opportunity to complete the Grand Slam. Magnus Cort's there, G's trying to hang on, and yet again from the breakaway, it's EF Education Easy Post. Wet surface, it's Tao Geoghegan Hart who is down, and Tao Geoghegan Hart who's in trouble here. It's Nico Denz all the way, it's Nico Denz all the way, he goes, and finally it's his. Look at Denz, it's been a dream race for him. He's at the front, looking to make it 2 up. Denz, the big German, goes again. Here's G trying to get around though. Derek G to the line, Derek G, oh, I don't know. It's Denz who wins. There we go, into the centre, McNulty's there, Healy's there, it's Brandon McNulty, and today is the day.
Okay, it's been a fascinating battle so far, hasn't it? Let's start with how you're seeing the GC battle shaping up, because it's been very cagey this week, hasn't it? Sure, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. Weather conditions haven't helped the race, maybe. Also, the final week. This is going to be a real killer of a week, as we say in cycling terms. And I think everybody's just keeping their cards close to their chest, and anybody has hopes to get into the top 5. They want to just wait for the final week. They feel that that's where they can do the performance that will get them in that position, and not burning energy unnecessarily in the earlier part trying to go in the attacks on some of those climbs or go in breakaways. So I think that the final week has just scared everybody, and right from the guys wanting to win down to the first 5, 6 in the GC.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of dissent on social media about the
dissent
way
on social media.
Yeah,
never.
Funny that, isn't it? About the way the GC battle's shaping up. And do you think it's because in recent years people have been racing Grand Tours like there's no tomorrow, whereas this Giro feels like it harks back to pre-COVID times where people are looking ahead a little bit more to this killer final week?
I think there's a little bit of, we've probably been quite spoiled in the last few years, and people say, oh, why are you banging on about it being such a special, because it is a special era of racing and we have been spoiled, certainly the last 2 or 3 years. But there's so many different factors at play here. I mean, if Evenepoel was still in the race, 2 minutes ahead, 1 minute ahead, there'd be moves having to be made. Tao Geoghegan Hart unfortunately crashed out this week. That's 1 card less to play for one team. They're waiting and waiting and waiting. Primož Roglic is in a perfect position, 2 seconds behind, let's say, the virtual leader of the race, who's Geraint Thomas. We know that Bernard Mireille is in the pink jersey. So he doesn't really have to move yet. And as Sean was just saying, it's backloaded. That's the idea, the identity of the Giro d'Italia, certainly at least for the last 15, 20 years. Everything is at the end, and it's been getting even more extreme as the years have gone by. They've sort of made it their identity. We can argue maybe before the next route's out whether that's right or wrong, but this is what we've got, and that's probably the main reason why people are waiting.
Yeah, and so it is tightly packed, isn't it? We've got a lot of contenders. Who do you think is going to be best placed for this final week, Sean? Who are going to be the movers and shakers?
Well, I think if you look at the top of the GC, the best place is to be at the top in the top 3 places there. And if you look at Geraint Thomas, he's in a really good position. Roglic, a better one because he hasn't to control the race over the last number of days. Although Ineos, they got rid of the pink jersey and took that pressure off. And Caruso, he's just there waiting. And I think, the teams now are so strong as well at this point in the race. If you try something as it was talking about, it's so difficult because you're going to have the backing of team domestiques that will rectify the situation. But when you get into the final week, Everybody will be getting more and more tired. The terrain is, going to be really difficult. So I don't think we'll have as many guys in the final. I think it'll be a bigger shake-up, and that's where I think we'll see the GC guys. And then you go down the GC, and I would be concerned if I was in the race and I was up there in the top 3 or 4 that you get ambushed from behind. And you have Butrago, you have Jack Haig, you have Rubio. Pino's there.
Well, that'd be a turn up for the books, wouldn't it? My word.
Yes, well, Pino's a one, he's the one that will try and maybe get into the breakaways. You have also Kus, who's, he's about 7 minutes down, I think, on the GC. So all of those guys, down there in that position are a danger one, because there is the terrain and the opportunity to do it in the final week, because, you have these mountains at the very start, and if there's fireworks, well then, you could find yourself in a move, with a lot of guys, a big group of guys, and who will ride behind? We could see that, and we could see those guys coming back very much up in the GC ranking again.
And as a rider, Sean, like you mentioned the weather earlier, how much is that going to take its toll? And of our contenders, we've got a Welshman who's well used to rain. We've got Roglic, a former ski jumper. Who are going to be the riders you think that will be able to shake off these horrific conditions that they've been?
Yeah, it has been horrific conditions, but now we're getting better weather the last couple of days. And when you get a day or two of good weather, then you get that out of the system. The muscles and things, they warm up again. And in the wet conditions every day, that's where it can catch you. And if you get a big day in the mountains where it's really cold, it can have a big effect on your performance. But I think going forward, if we get the weather, dry conditions, well then I don't think the past weather conditions will have any bearing on what the results will be and the performance of the riders going to this final week.
Cool. Okay. Well, fingers crossed for better weather than this last week, and just so that we can have all the stages as well. So no snow, please. Now let's dive into some of the stages in the past week as well, shall we? The breakaway battles, very much the story. Most recently in Bergamo with McNulty and Ben Healy. That was a crack, wasn't it? What did you make of it, Rob?
It was, and Marco Frigo as well, who kept coming back and coming back and coming back, even to the last 500-600 metres. A young guy from just up the road in Bassano del Grappa. He kept trying, and he was there, just like the whole Israel Premier Tech team. I think most people would be desperate for them to get a stage after Derek G's, fantastic ride so far. And Berwick's been up there as well. They've been trying. But between Healy and McNulty, that was an interesting one, because McNulty was another one. Healy dropped him, he returned. Healy dropped him again. Third time he went, but McNulty was stuck to his wheel, wasn't he, up that old city climb in Bergamo. And you have to first of all give it to Healy for the way he's raced. He's such an entertainer. He's a commentator's dream, isn't he? Always attacking from the start. There he is, making it interesting. Whether in the future he's going to have to be a bit more clever about where he uses his energy, we'll have to see. But for now it's working, and you have to give the credit to Brandon McNulty. I think he was really clever, wasn't he, the way he raced all the way to the line and waited and then pounced.
Yes, and probably a bit lucky as well, because Frigo came back and he had the speed coming from behind. He just kept going when he caught them with 300 to go, and Healy reacted immediately. So it was a dream for McNulty. He was in the wheel, in the drafting there, and then he just made his effort at the perfect time. And if it had been a 2-up sprint, I think Healy might have just played the game, waited, and then kicked 150 metres ago, and then it would be a different sprint. But I think McNulty did play it very well. He was very cool in that final, which that's the way you can win races. If you can keep your calm, then you can win.
And that's impressive, given that Healy's already on a bit of a roll, isn't he? Having won a stage, whereas that was McNulty's first Grand Tour stage. So yeah, fair play to the guy. Also, 2 breakaway victories for Nico Denz as well. He too had never won a stage at a Grand Tour before. Then suddenly 2 in 1 week.
I mean, I found out this week that he's got family from the south of Italy. His grandfather was from the far south of Italy, and he's won 2 stages now, as you say. And on the stage podium for winning a stage at the Giro d'Italia, you get a big gift card from the Italian Railways who sponsor that. So he's got 2 of those now. He'll better take a family holiday down south. He's been absolutely brilliant. Attacking, and, we talked about the GC battle before. Leonard Kemner's sitting there. Okay, they've lost Alexander Vlasov, but for Bora Hansgrohe, the Giro's made now, isn't it? So there's less pressure on Kemner and maybe a bit more of an opportunity to take a bit more of a risk in the final week with Kemner as well. You never know.
Yes, I think with Kemner, although the team have, got the results, it's been a dream Giro for them now with 2 stage wins. But still the pressure's on. If you're a GC man and you're there in the team, you're being paid to do that job, it doesn't take a lot of pressure off. You still have that pressure on your shoulders. But yeah, the morale of the team will be much better, of course. And yeah, what a result, for Bora. And they're still very much in the fight to make a good place in the GC standings.
Do you think that the pressure is on Cameron? Because it's his first roll of the dice for a GC, isn't it? But so do you reckon they'll be expecting things of him?
Well, they always talk the same old talk. Okay, no pressure. We'll see how you go. But even in my day, when things weren't anything like now, you go to those smaller races in the earlier part of the season, and they say, "Oh, no pressure. See how you go." But when you're in the race, they come talking to you, and I think there will be pressure on him to try and see what he can do, and for the team, for himself as well, just to new territory to see what he can do in the GC. Up there every day, trying to stay with the big ones of this Giro. So it's probably a test as well for them, and the pressure will be on him. I think he will be feeling that as we go into this final week, where he is at the moment as well. It's going to be nervous times.
Yeah, great bit of insight there. Now, speaking of pressure, before we move on, should we talk about Thibaut Pinot? Mentioned him earlier. He was defeated at Crans-Montana by Rubio. What do you think he did wrong, Sean, after that little squabble?
Well, he attacked much too early. He just put in these real violent attacks, and you show your hand then, and he just kept on doing it. When the riders were coming back to him, then we could see he was, he was really getting bothered about those guys chasing him down. But that's bike racing, and the team car as well. The team director. Sometimes I say to myself, well, I was a director, I say to him, look, you ride a bit and get the others to ride as well, and just try and get as far up the mountain, and then try and work it in the final 2 or 3 kilometres and really just burst yourself to try and get away from them and see what will happen. But yeah, he's done the same, I think, on numerous times when he gets into the breakaway. Looks like they're going to go all the way for the stage victory. Even 40k out in the stage, you could see the way he was throwing these shapes and moving on the bike, and the guys can read that. The other riders, they know his style of racing. They say, "Oh, careful, Pino's on a good day today. We have to watch him closely."
It is funny, isn't it? Like, as a spectator, we can kind of look at these guys at the very top of their game and expect them to do everything right. But there's a lot of mistakes in racecraft, even at the very top end in breakaways, aren't there?
Of course there are, and you can bet, you're talking about Pinot there, in the Valley he was doing that as well, and you can bet your life that the sports directors from Movistar, EF Education, Easy Post were saying, hang on a minute, Pinot really wants this. Play the game with him.
Yeah.
Surely, because the history with him has shown that he can be like this. I mean, I love watching him, absolutely love watching him, but I'd be the first to recognise that he's the architect of his own downfall sometimes, as much as he entertains us.
Yeah, I'd agree. I absolutely agree. And like you, I kind of want to see him succeed in this final week. Definitely, there's something about him. Right, one man who's been watching the Giro d'Italia with his eyes eagerly on his statistics book is, of course, Cillian Kelly.
Geraint Thomas gets himself a stint in the pink jersey 5 years after the last time he led a Grand Tour, which was of course down the Champs-Élysées in 2018. But this gap of 5 years is nowhere near the biggest gap between 2 stints leading a Grand Tour. That record belongs to Moser. Not Francesco, but his older brother Aldo Moser. He wore the pink jersey in 1958 and then didn't lead a Grand Tour again until 1971, 13 years later. Jonathan Milan is already a stage winner in this year's Giro, but we have been robbed of seeing an eponymous Grand Tour stage winner for the first time ever because the Giro organisers heinously decided not to end the Giro in Milan. Maybe next year. Milan is the best shot we've got at an eponymous Grand Tour stage win since Pello Bilbao was in a breakaway to Bilbao at the Vuelta. Honourable mention for Nicolas France, who won the Tour de France, but he's let himself down with how he spelled his name. And although not a Grand Tour, also an honourable mention for Greg LeMond, who won the Worlds twice. And to finish, not a stat, but just an incredible anecdote. Perhaps the biggest talking point of this year's Giro has been the number of riders who have dropped out of the race. We could be headed for the least finishers at a Grand Tour since the doping-riddled Festina scandal-filled Tour de France of 1998. Some teams only have 3 riders left. However, in 1987, Bjarne Riis was riding the Vuelta for the Lucas Mullers Orbea team. By stage 10, for various reasons, he was the only rider left on his team. All the team staff were begging Riis to withdraw so they could all go home. After 2 stages on his own, Riis did have to withdraw because he felt ill, and Riis wrote in his autobiography, "I had no proof whatsoever, but I was convinced that the team had poisoned me in order to make me quit so I could go home." Amazing!
Right, speaking of veteran cyclists, news potentially breaking today. We don't know, but Gazzetta dello Sport is saying that Mark Cavendish is about to make a big announcement and that he's going to be retiring at the end of this season. So what are your first thoughts on that, Rob?
Well, whether it's true or not, we'll have to wait a few hours to find out. Wouldn't surprise, just because of the age, and I think we've been expecting it for the last few years. Mark will be expecting it at some point, and if he has made that decision, then it's goodbye to the greatest sprinter that ever rode a bike. 161 wins, all the way back from that first big one at the Scheldt Praise, 34 Tour stages and counting maybe, 16 Giro stages and counting maybe as well, World Championship, 3 Welter stages, a million other things, the odd GC here and there in Qatar and Dubai. Has there anybody been ever better sprinting?
No, I think Cav is the better sprinter of all times. And what a career he's had. And it comes to the time, the page is going to turn. It's there. And
Finish, not a stat, but just an incredible anecdote. Perhaps the biggest talking point of this year's Giro has been the number of riders who have dropped out of the race. We could be headed for the least finishers at a Grand Tour since the doping-riddled Festina scandal-filled Tour de France of 1998. Some teams only have 3 riders left. However, in 1987, Bjarne Riis was riding the Vuelta for the Lucas Mullers Orbea team. By stage 10, for various reasons, he was the only rider left on his team. All the team staff were begging Riis to withdraw so they could all go home. After 2 stages on his own, Riis did have to withdraw because he felt ill, and Riis wrote in his autobiography, "I had no proof whatsoever, but I was convinced that the team had poisoned me in order to make me quit so I could go home." Amazing!
Right, speaking of veteran cyclists, news potentially breaking today. We don't know, but Gazzetta dello Sport is saying that Mark Cavendish is about to make a big announcement and that he's going to be retiring at the end of this season. So what are your first thoughts on that, Rob?
Well, whether it's true or not, we'll have to wait a few hours to find out. Wouldn't surprise, just because of the age, and I think we've been expecting it for the last few years. Mark will be expecting it at some point, and if he has made that decision, then it's goodbye to the greatest sprinter that ever rode a bike. 161 wins, all the way back from that first big one at the Scheldt Praise, 34 Tour stages and counting maybe, 16 Giro stages and counting maybe as well, World Championship, 3 Welter stages, a million other things, the odd GC here and there in Qatar and Dubai. Has there anybody been ever better sprinting?
no, I think Cav is the better sprinter of all times. And what a career he's had. And it comes to the time, the page is going to turn. It's there, and it's looking like he is going to retire. That's what we're expecting, but we'll have to wait and see. But what a career. And the way he's riding still, when you consider, some of the other riders at that point in the career, they were not within an ass's roar of that performance Cav is doing. We can see him in this Giro, he's getting close, and possibility of getting a win, and then of course there's the Tour later in the year. So he's having a really good end of career after such a long one, and great to see.
Do you think he has got it in him? Well, firstly, to take a stage in this year's Giro, I mean, Is there a sprint stage left in this final week?
Potentially 2.
Potentially 2, okay. So do you think he's got it? And then looking ahead to the Tour, which is potentially a step up in terms of the depth of sprinting field, do you think he can do it, Sean?
Yes, I think he can do it in this one. He's shown already he's been close. Unlucky some of the sprints here with crashes and that in the end, but he's there and he's very close. And when you're that close, you just have to go right for you if you can get the right run in. He did get a very good sprint when Ackermann won, but Ackermann was really strong on that occasion, and then Milan came from behind, of course. But he's very, very close, and when you're that close as a sprinter, then you're just praying, okay, hopefully now that I get the right run in, my team do the job as far as and as well as they can, and then I just follow the other sprinters and get into the real good position. And in sprinting, that's the way it is. If you have got the form, you're showing it in the previous stages, then a bit of luck, it's possible.
And what does it feel like when you're getting towards the end of your racing career? Like, what is it that it's harder to win because he's not got the same kick, or do you think it's the training that feels like it's grinding him down after 20 odd years? Like, what is it that's the thing that makes you go, I think this is going to be my last year,
Well, I think the first thing is your last year, it can be horrible and it can be great. And for Cav, it's great because he's up there, he's in the action, and he's fighting to get a win. So that is a great way to finish a long career. And, that gives you the morale. And I think the thing is that just new guys coming in, is Cav as fast as he was in his real great years? Probably not as explosive, and new guys coming as well. So that combination, he's not winning the stages and as many races as he has been. And also, there's a lot of times as well, you don't take the risk when it's not big important ones. When you get into the career, you think a bit more. When you're young, you just take those risks and you don't think at all about them. So he's, calculating, as I call, and when there's a sprint for the win in a Giro or in a Tour, it's a totally different. You're going through a different frame of mind, and you're prepared, to take huge risks. You don't care then because you're thinking about winning a stage in the Giro, winning a stage in the Tour of France, and you forget everything else, those dangers, all of that. It's not a thought in your mind at all.
Yeah, well, we wait to see, firstly, for confirmation that is what's going to be announced today, and then, we wait with interest for this final week, definitely. A quick word now on the Maglia Ciclamino jersey, the sprints jersey. We've lost Mats Pettersson, who we were talking up as a potential winner for it, but Jonathan Milan now seems to be absolutely dominating. How impressed have you been with him? This is his debut, isn't it, in the Grand
Tour debut. We haven't seen him too much on the road, really. He was a track specialist, tremendous pursuiter. We said last week he's a big guy, sprinting differently. Maybe he could be more efficient or whatever. But I tell you what, whatever he's doing, keep on doing it because he's surviving. He is thriving in this Giro d'Italia. And yet we've been saying the big mountains are still to come. There might be the odd day where there's a race for the time limit. We haven't really had yet that at this Giro, have we? Where people have been struggling to make the time limit or anything like that. But for the minute, it's difficult to look past him. There are other riders hanging around there, the guys who keep getting in breaks. Derek G keeps picking up points and things like that, and it could be a process of elimination this week depending on how hard it is in the end, but there's nothing to stop Jonathan Milan if he keeps up this form.
No, that's right. And you mentioned Derek G, another track rider as well, actually. Another rider who's having a bit of a breakout in what is his first Grand Tour. He's among a fair few, actually, that are breaking out at this year's Giro.
Hello. Just finished the second week of the Giro d'Italia. I'm a mess right now. From stage 8 until now, 3 second places. The third one was so close. Not that I expected to be up there, but it was definitely frustrating to already have 2 second places and just closer every time.
It's been a dream race for him. He's at the front, looking to make it 2 up. Den's the big German goes again. Here's G trying to get around though. Derek G to the line. Derek G. Oh, I don't know.
The support has been amazing. I can't express how fantastic it's been to see so many people reaching out. And I mean, I never thought I would get this level of support from people I've never met. It's indescribable.
In tricolore time at this Giro d'Italia, but look at G. He's holding on to this sprint, and Derek G with quite the performance to take second place.
I couldn't be more grateful to be in this position, to have good legs, and to be able to capitalize on them and get results for the team, which has been crushing it. I mean, the team atmosphere is fantastic. Sebastian Berwick, podium to stage. Today, Marco Frigo almost won. But yeah, super happy with the week. Beyond my wildest dreams, for sure.
Right, let's go back to Derek G, shall we then? What have you made of his Giro, Rob, so far? And do you think he's going to develop as a rider, and into what, I guess?
I mean, that is the big question. Again, sorry to give a pretty boring answer straight up. What hasn't been boring, though, has been his riding. From where we've been sat in the commentary box, he has been hugely entertaining. And it starts off, don't you? You see somebody in a breakaway, oh, this is a plucky ride, a good ride. Then they're in the breakaway again, oh, inform this person. Third time, revelation of the Giro d'Italia. Fourth time, and I'm saying at least 4, because he's had 3 second places, a 4th place, and we saw that wonderful, fantastic encouragement from the whole of the Israel Premier Tech team, from Sam Bewley in the DS car with his phrases and motivation, talking to Seb Berwick as well, Derek G we've just mentioned, Frigo. So as a team they've been going for it, but as a rider, Derek G, 25, he's a relatively late developer now in modern cycling. He's been on the track, winning races at continental level, intercontinental level as well. I think I'll talk about that. I mean, the Americas, North and South America, in the Pan Am Games and things like that. So he's done really well there. But on European roads, this is the first real experience we've had of him. Another fantastic debutant, breakout rider. He's strong. He's obviously got a bit of a sprint if he's up there in small groups and coming in second and things like that. Hasn't won one yet, although we saw, I think, with the second Dens when he was coming and and Dens was celebrating. In the end, it was a photo finish, but we didn't really need it too much when you looked at the overhead shot. He reminds me a little of Thomas de Kent, but I'm going to caveat that with saying that I think we say that about a lot of people who get into breakaways, don't we? The tackle photo on. He's got his own unique abilities, and I think we need to see more of him. But he's been on different parkour, and that's a really good sign. He's not just a guy for a flat day, because he can climb and he's fast as well.
Yeah. I think he's an all-rounder. He can get up the climbs really well. He's fast in the sprint. So he's got that package, and he's proven this race that when he gets into the breakaways, he can go on, he can finish it off in the end. He's there. So it proves that he's able to stay the distance, and with the qualities he's got, climbing, sprinting, doing it all, it's going to be a matter of time before he wins big ones.
Yeah, I've been really impressed as well when he was saying early on that he was coming to his first Grand Tour and he was hoping to survive, hoping to get through, and then to get in not just 1 break but 3, and to grow in confidence. That shows, I think, a certain something about a rider, doesn't it? Now, one rider that hasn't broken through at this year's Giro, but this is his breakthrough season, I guess you could say, is Ben Healy. Sean, do you know Ben Healy at all?
Well, I wouldn't know him well. I'd know of him because being Irish, and when he was coming up through the development, I would have, been watching him a bit, and when he was with Trinity and coming through there, I was hearing that he's a very good, he's a talented rider. But you hear that about so many riders in that level, and then when they make the move into the Pro Tour peloton, they struggle, to just come up that step again and to be, competitive at that level.
Has he surprised you this season?
Big time. I think everybody is talking about him, and in the early part of the season, we did see last year he was able to get into breakaways, but there were breakaways going away early and getting caught. But now this year we've seen him in the early season, in this Giro, of course. He gets into a breakaway, and he's the guy who's forcing the pace to get into the breakaway first of all. Then he's there in the final. He's blown that breakaway apart if there's hills on it in the end, or if there's a mountain to be climbed. So he's proven again. He's a rider that can be very, very competitive in the end of a very difficult stage, and we've seen him in this Giro a number of times.
Now, moving on, we have a brand new documentary out this week on GCN+, and it's all about one of the most legendary Giro d'Italias of all time.
The Giro d'Italia has been writing human dramas for well over a century. We think of Charlie Gaulle in 1956, riding through a blizzard on Monte Bondone to claim an improbable Maglia Rosa. Or 6 years later, when half the peloton abandoned on the Passo Role. However, one stage in particular still resonates today. Stage 14 of the 1988 Giro and the Passo di Gavia.
Perché il Gavia non è soltanto una montagna, è un luogo storico quasi metafisico.
We spoke to riders whose careers were made on that mountain.
So I do a little of this and a snowball. Like I cleared an inch or two of snow off the top of my head.
And to some whose careers needed to be rebuilt.
Per 2 anni ho passato psicologicamente, ero tutto da ricostruire.
This is a story of a stage so extreme that it would be unthinkable in today's cycling, from the riders themselves and from the people who chronicled their suffering.
Una corsa, una tappa che è sfuggita di mano, è diventata incontrollabile.
Io ho visto il mio collega Ilario Biondi cadere 2 volte con la moto davanti a me.
Patron del Tongo, al mio fianco, urla: Mio Dio, muore! Franco muore, fate qualcosa!
Wow, I cannot wait to watch that one. Out today, on Monday, if you're watching it on Monday. Sure, really interesting as well, timely, to see conditions like that. And also, as we heard Herbie Sykes there in the trailer, talking about the fact that we wouldn't see races being contested in conditions like that anymore. Was it really a case of you raced in worse weather than riders do now, back in the day?
Certainly.
Really?
You know, yes. I think there was Paris-Nice that I rode, and snow on the road. We had to make descents on the snow for compounded snow on 2 or 3 kilometers on the descent, and the weather conditions that we got in some of the Paris-Nices, they wouldn't race them now. But that's the times, isn't it? And now the teams and the riders and. They seem to, have more control. Back in my time, you had, the big name riders, and if they decided, yes, we're going to race, well then we're going to race, and that was it. And there was, no question about it. But now we can see, with the riders' organisation, all of that, and the teams, they just start talking, and this ongoing discussion, and it's at a late moment. We don't know whether it's going to be a stage or not a stage, but but in the end of the day, I think safety is the first thing. And in hindsight, we can always look back and say, yeah, we could have raced. But when you see the start, when the stage was cut short the other day, it looked really horrible. And you were saying, well, if it's like that in the climbs and on the the big descents and that, but it wasn't at the end. So it's easy to talk, later on when you see the weather gets better as the day go on. But definitely, in the olden days, in my time, they would have raced in those conditions in this Giro.
So basically, the peloton of the 1980s have to thank you and Bernardino for basically being willing to race in snowy conditions. As the patron, you were there going like, well, it's fine, guys. It's only a little bit of snow. It must make your life harder, Rob, as a commentator, having stages where you don't know how long they're going to be or whether they're going to take place. But from your perspective, do you think it's a good thing that stages are kind of either abandoned or cut short for riders' safety, or do you think sometimes it could be a case of could just crack on?
For riders' safety, definitely. We don't want accidents. I've been in the horrible position of having to commentate on somebody dying on a couple of occasions in my career so far. I don't really want that again, if I'm talking from a selfish point of view. Obviously, I've never been a rider, I've never been a rider's cousin. So I can't talk in terms of what's safe and what isn't. That's a decision for the riders to make. What I would say, if I'm sitting at home and I'm a fan, and I see it the other day when it was dry on the descent, obviously you have to try your very best to transport yourself into the mind of the rider that has been on the road in the rain for the last couple of weeks, where it's been cold, where it's been miserable, all the things we don't see, and you have to do your best to think about that. trying to put gloves on, trying to grip the bars when you're freezing and you've no feeling in your hand. And I think then you'll try to begin to understand that it isn't easy, and you might have some empathy. I can also understand why people didn't have so much empathy given it was dry the other day. But for that reason, I think there should also be an attempt maybe to have some sort of independent judge in terms of weather conditions. I think safety, though, that's something that really should be in the riders' court. We're talking about dangerous descents or bits of road. They're the people who have to do it. They're the ones who have families at home. And that is, the organisation, the fact that they now have a voice, whether you agree with that voice or not on occasions, that has to be seen as a positive thing.
Yeah, it is a tricky one though, isn't it? Because, as you say, the safety of riders is sacrosanct, should be sacrosanct. But bike tech is so much better than it was, when we're looking back at the 80s. The advent of disc brakes mean that, there's no problem with riding down wet descents. And so I think in the eyes of a lot of fans, it feels like it's maybe just discomfort that is the reason why people don't want it. You don't want to go down a descent and get really cold when perhaps, that is part of the legend of some of, like the Gavia in '88,
Yeah, I mean, Gavia in '88 shouldn't happen again. I mean, you'll see why in the documentary. I mean, there's people who can't feel their hands properly, for goodness sake, still.
Yeah.
And we're in 2023. As much as we'll all sit down, have a nice glass of wine or whatever, and a cup of coffee or whatever, and watch it and enjoy it, that sort of thing shouldn't really happen again. What we have to be really careful about, I think, and again, some riders who don't have to go for the GC will probably disagree, is that winning a Grand Tour is surviving long days in the saddle. A massive part in why people aren't as good in the third week on a climb is because of what's been happening and chipping away at the energy reserves of 3 weeks. We can't change cycling to an extent that we've got 80-kilometre stages every 2 days and 1 and 2 mountains. It's good every so often, and the end of the stage was a decent watch the other day, and if it was safe, then probably it was the right decision. But complete about turning cycling and saying, oh no, 200-kilometre stages have no place in cycling, or you can't race any day under 2 or 3 days consecutive under the rain. We've got to be careful with that. But again, my main empathy lies with the riders, but we do have to think of the big picture.
Yeah, I think it's good to keep having these discussions, isn't it? To make sure that the history of cycling and the legacy is preserved, but also with safety, and it impacts on consecutive days, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Because I really want to talk about the Vuelta a Burgos Feminas now as well. Some really cracking races in Spain this week, with Demi Vollering claiming overall victory after a brutal attack on the final stage. Rob, she is having some season, isn't she, this year?
She's incredible, and of course we're this season saying goodbye to one Dutch superstar in Annemiek van Vleuten. We already knew about Vollering, but this season, as she stepped up. We saw the Ardennes triple. We've seen her so good in the Vuelta a España, the first of the new Grand Tours, if you like. The Vuelta going to a week rather than just the Madrid Challenge. And now on Lagunas de Neila, which is the sort of emblematic climb at the end of any Vuelta Burgos, really worth its salt. All the main editions that have had it in down the years. She's just completing her palmarès. So young. I mean, there's still things left for her to win, thankfully, but she's part of an SD Works team that a few years back you saw them dominating the sport, rather in the sense that Quick-Step were dominating the men's sport, because the women's sport was mainly about the classics, plus maybe for the odd team the Giro, and that was it. Now we've got these Grand Tours, thankfully, and it is more of a full, fleshed-out season, and they're probably going to have their best season ever. They are unstoppable.
They are indeed, yeah, a lot to look forward to in the Grand Tours coming up. Also, we should talk about her teammate, Lorena Vives, relegated in the sprint on stage 2, which has caused some debate, I think, as to whether or not that was right or wrong, but then an incredible sprint finish from Vives to take the win on the 3rd stage as well. So you don't often see sprinters in that kind of in full flight like that, and showing the contrast between her and the breakaway. But pretty amazing that Vives has managed to continue her winning ways, I guess, on SD Works. How hard is it, Sean, do you think, for a team like that to manage both the expectations of a superstar sprinter and then GC riders like Vollering? Is it one for the management, or is it one for the riders to work things out, to make sure everyone gets to?
Well, I think it's for the management, because they decide the tactics and what races we're going to support one rider more than the other. But if you're a big team, of course, you can do that. And in In cycling, we see that in the men's and also in the women's, and yeah, I think with the team they've got, yeah, you can do both. But yeah, as Rob said, it's it's great to see in women's cycling. We had the classic races and the one days, and now we're having so many tours and the big tours. It's amazing the way it's come along in the last number of years, and yeah, may it continue.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, going back to the management thing. SD Works, after their slight hiccup at Strada Bianca, where we had 2 riders going for the win and evidently falling out, now we've got Vollering leading VBES out. So they're obviously doing something right, aren't they, I think, now?
I think in the background as well, because we saw the follow-up to that was after Amstel Gold, wasn't there? And it was the same 2 riders involved, a very different reaction. So I think either it was done for the cameras or, let's think more positive, and something was done behind the scenes. So I think the management is on a very, very good track right there right now.
Yeah. Right then, we're going to leave it there for this week. Thank you very much to Rob and Sean for joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the end of the Giro. I think it's shaping up to be an absolute cracker, isn't it? We'll see you next week.